Well, good morning. My name is Jim Boullion, Director of Government Affairs for Renew Wisconsin. I'm honored to be moderating our first panel of the day, laying the foundation for renewable energy growth in Wisconsin. This summit and our panel discussions would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors, and I'd like to especially thank Invenergy for sponsoring this morning's panel. During our discussion, feel free to use the chat box to engage with other summit attendees. You can also post questions for the panelists in the Q&A box. There's a lot of ground to cover today, but we will try to leave some time at the end for a few of your questions. All right, so let's get started. We have with us this morning two of the key figures that will be help leading the state of Wisconsin's energy policy in coming years. We're going to discuss some of the efforts they have been working on this last year and what they think we need to do in the future to achieve our clean energy goals. First on our panel is Joel Brennan, Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Administration. Before joining the Evers administration, Joel served as President and CEO of Discovery World. Located on Milwaukee's lakefront, Discovery World is Wisconsin's premier science and technology center. We're also very happy to have with us Public Service Commissioner Tyler Huebner. Tyler was appointed to the commission by Governor Evers just last March. As some of you know, prior to his appointment to the PSC, Tyler was the executive director of Renew Wisconsin. Our loss was definitely Wisconsin's gain. To help me moderate today's panel, we have invited Dan Ebert, Executive Director of the Midwest Energy Research Consortium, better known as MWERC. Dan has over 25 years of experience in utility and energy issues. He is a former chairman of the Wisconsin Public Service Commission and spent several years before that working in Washington, D.C. Thanks for helping out today, Dan, and would you like to say a few words of introduction?
Thank you, Jim, and thanks to Renew for the opportunity to participate here today. The Midwest Energy Research Consortium primarily has an economic development mission made up of 90 companies and academic partners, primarily in the energy, power, and control space. We recently completed an extensive process to take a look at how we can accelerate the deployment of new technologies in the utility space. Many of the folks who are in attendance today, as well as Tyler when he was still executive director, helped lead that effort. So I think, just one opening statement I would make is I think, we are on the precipice to some fairly significant changes in the utility space when you look at where the market is going, the energy markets are going, when you look at the synergy that's emerging from the utilities, as well as the stakeholders. I think this 2021 is teed up to be a really exciting year advancing renewables, and I appreciate Renew's continued leadership. We're here in part to a lot of the things that you guys have done, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the panel here today and the rest of the conference. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, before we begin the panel discussion, we are very pleased to welcome a very special guest, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. He has recorded an opening message that will lay the foundation for our discussion today. Please welcome Lieutenant Governor Barnes.
Hey everybody, I am Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, so happy and honored to be joining you all virtually for Renew Wisconsin's Renewable Energy Summit, and particularly to provide opening remarks for this panel that will be focused on laying the groundwork for a clean energy future for our state. Now, I want to take a moment to thank the leaders that you are going to hear from on the panel. First, Dan Ebert from Midwest Energy Research Consortium, Public Service Commissioner, and no stranger, Tyler Huebner, and also my good friend, Department of Administration Secretary Joel Brennan. Now, all of these speakers play a critical role in moving us towards renewable energy. And so I know their insights are going to be beneficial for everyone who's tuning in today. And I also want to send a huge thank you to Jim and all of Renew Wisconsin for organizing and hosting this important summit in a way that's safe for everyone involved as we continue to battle COVID-19. This pandemic has certainly taken a toll on our state. And as Lieutenant Governor, I've had the privilege of traveling this state, and I've had an opportunity to meet with many Wisconsinites from all walks of life, but we know things are different now. And in those travels, I've also seen firsthand the devastating impacts of climate change on communities, on our health, and our entire economy. I've had opportunities to meet with farmers whose livelihoods were destroyed by extreme weather events. I've met with local officials who are gravely concerned about how climate change will affect local tourism. And I've also met with people whose communities continue to be polluted But these same people don't necessarily have a way to relocate their family to healthier and safer spaces. And unfortunately, Wisconsin still lags behind in addressing these issues, and that's why Governor Evers and I have been committed since day one to making sure that we embrace the science, that we make Wisconsin a leader in tackling the climate crisis. We started by joining the U.S. Climate Alliance, and we vowed to uphold the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. That was step one. And then Governor Evers signed Executive Order number 38. This executive order created the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, and it also set the goal of ensuring that all electricity consumed within the state of Wisconsin is 100% carbon-free by 2050 or sooner, a goal that I know we can achieve. And Governor Evers also created the Task Force on Climate Change and named me to serve as chair. The charge was to identify strategies to combat the climate crisis in a way that put science and data together with experiences of Wisconsinites. And after a year of discussing various aspects of the crisis and listening to input from the public and also learning from the expertise of our native nations, our farmers, our businesses, and our nonprofit organizations like Renew, we published our comprehensive report this past December. Now, this included over 50 solutions to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change on our state. And the solutions in the report span 9 different sectors, and many of them include provisions that are going to help us all move forward, specifically how we combat environmental injustice, how we create green job training programs for displaced and marginalized workers, and also increase funding to help our farmers adapt more sustainable practices, as well as promoting clean transportation policies. And there are, of course, a number of solutions in the report that are meant to pave the way for our state to transition to cleaner energy consumption. Now, these solutions aim to improve data collection and reporting, also to update our building codes to increase energy efficiency, and expanding the state's renewable energy capacity, as well as increase funding for Focus on Energy and other tools that will help Wisconsin's clean energy transition. Now, this area of the report is especially important because we know that we cannot take on the climate crisis or meet the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement if we don't make clean energy a priority in the state. And ultimately, that means that we need to move away from fossil fuels. This is the only way that we'll be able to secure a future for our planet and for the next generation and those to come. And now that our report is out, we are excited to get to work with the governor, the legislature, and stakeholders just like you to see where and how we can implement these policies best. And we all know the time is of the essence. We have to start making investments in clean energy now. It has to start today, and we have to transform Wisconsin into a place that welcomes these changes so that government bodies, our public institutions, and our industries start making a priority as well. So, as we move towards this transition, we have to be sure that we do so in an equitable way. We can't burden low-income communities with additional costs, and we also cannot withhold clean energy from the same communities. These are areas of our state that deserve access, and they need for it to be affordable. We also have to ensure that our transition to clean energy doesn't come at the expense of anyone's livelihood. So we have to have a just transition where those who are currently employed in the fossil fuel industry will be able to train and switch to clean energy jobs seamlessly. And most importantly, we have to make sure that our investments in green infrastructure and jobs are targeted towards those communities who have been the most impacted by the consequences of fossil fuels and the climate crisis. We know that extractive industries disproportionately harm communities of color, lower income, and other marginalized communities, especially here in Wisconsin, where we currently grapple with severe inequalities and inequities that exist along racial lines, and environmental justice, which runs parallel. And our reliance on fossil fuels only contributes to these environmental injustices, so we need to transition to a clean energy that is inclusive and equitable for everyone involved. And we kept this in mind throughout all the work of our task force, all of our discussions, and you'll see this focus on environmental justice reflected not just in the climate justice and equity section, but throughout solutions in the entire report. Now, a clean energy future means endless opportunities for Wisconsin. It means new businesses. It means new technologies. It means job creation. It means a means to provide family supporting jobs to more people, attracting, retaining talent, and so on. And our Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy has been working to develop our state's clean energy plan so that we can turn these opportunities into reality and meet our goals as soon as possible. Now, I personally believe that with the solutions laid out in the Climate Change Task Force report and the work that we're already doing to move towards a clean energy future, our administration can lay the foundation to move Wisconsin to a place where powering our lives does not come at the cost of our planet, but in fact, it comes with opportunity. Opportunity for everyone. But we cannot do so without your support or your participation. So I just want to say thank you one more time for your commitment to fighting for that future and our planet's future. I look forward to continuing to partner on this incredibly important work, and hopefully we'll be seeing each other in person soon someday. Until then, stay safe. Thanks so much for having me, and enjoy the panel.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Barnes, for sending us those comments and so nicely setting up our discussion today. Well, let's get started. Secretary Brennan, in his video, the Lieutenant Governor laid out an ambitious clean energy program and goals for Wisconsin. The DOA is obviously a key agency where a lot of this work is going to get done. Do you have any opening comments on those goals and how we might achieve them?
Sure, Jim. First of all, I appreciate the chance to be here, the chance to follow the Lieutenant Governor and to join Tyler here today. And if I'm not mistaken, I think if you go back 2 years, I think that Governor Evers may have been the first governor to attend a Renew conference, and in his very first month in office. And I hope that was a reflection that the Lieutenant Governor has certainly carried through about all the work and the priority that this administration has put on that. And in some ways, the kind of pent up energy and demand for this after a time, I think that the state government hadn't paid enough for a lot of attention to it. So I think that's, I'm excited, I'm eager to be here. I'm really proud to follow the Lieutenant Governor. And as you say, a lot of the work that's been done and a lot of the execution of that report and the work that we're going to be doing is going to happen inside DOA in that Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy. And really that's been work that's been ongoing since the governor outlined those in Executive Order 38, which created that office. And then having that new office here, I think for those who understand DOA's role across state government, we are a service agency across all of the enterprise. And so to be able to work with the PSC or the Department of Revenue, Workforce Development, WEDC on the implementation of all these things is something that I think is really going to be important in the months and years to come. So, just a couple of introductory comments. I mean, as we created the office here, I mean, we have kind of the economic and health goals that we are using to kind of focus on what we're doing. As the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, all electricity consumed within the state, 100% carbon free by 2050, fulfilling the carbon reduction goals of the Paris Climate Accords. He made a big point of this, and I think this is something that goes across all the work that we're doing, but reducing the impacts of energy generation and use on low-income residents of our state and communities of color, maximizing the creation of equitable opportunities. All those things are part of where we're going, I think, in this administration and what we want to do. And I think it's important to recognize that what we're doing at the state level is really building on what has happened at the local level with the utilities, with non-governmental organizations. Inside that climate change task force report, it was noted that the city of River Falls in 2020 was the first to go to all renewables, 100% renewables in January 2020 for all of their city buildings. And that's just one example of how communities around the state have led that. And in some ways, the state, I think, has now picked up the mantle, and what local units of government have done, what industries are doing, is something I think that we have a responsibility to keep forwarding and working on. There's lots of work to be done. Just a couple other things I guess I would mention is, I think, and Dan mentioned this a little bit, but I think we're on the precipice of some real opportunity. People understand, I think, and they know that that the incoming president was, he was responsible for the ARA back in 2009 and the Obama stimulus package. And And he's outlined an interest and a pathway towards 10 million new clean energy jobs. And what a true stimulus means. You know, there has been this discussion over the last 6 months of various stimulus packages. And I think that that's truly a misnomer. All we've been doing, and that the federal support, while it's been very important for industries that have suffered across the state in the current recession, whether they be in the lodging or entertainment, movies, people, you know, the unemployment compensation, people who are at risk of losing the roof over their heads, all that is really important, but none of that is stimulating. That is just allowing people to kind of stand still at best. And so, you know, I'm looking forward in the coming weeks and months to, you know, what could truly be a true stimulus package at the federal level and really investing in those areas. And I think Wisconsin is well poised to do that. We'll probably talk a little bit more about the ways I think we're poised to do that and some of the things that we have started with. The last thing I'd say about this is, you know, we're in very fragile, very challenging times when it comes to state finances and the state budget, you know, and the governor has recognized that 2 separate times over the last several months. He's called for the state, for our departments to turn back money to the general fund and to really, you know, understand that we all have to tighten our belt to the tune of more than $370 million over the last several months. But as he put out way back in May and June, put out the notices to the agencies about their state budget priorities and kind of where we're going with those things, you know, it was acknowledged that this was going to be a very challenging time. But the 2 priorities that the governor put on making the investments in the coming budget were on equity and sustainability. So those are hallmarks of this administration. You're going to be seeing that reflected. I'm not going to today steal any thunder of the governor or too much thunder when it comes to what he's going to unveil in his budget address in February. But you can be sure that those things which have been hallmarks of the administration from the beginning, which the lieutenant governor focused on, that those of equity and sustainability, both of which are part of this effort moving forward, are going to be reflected as priorities when we get to that budget.
I'm sure there are a lot of folks on the call here that we're hoping to get a few sneak peeks into the budget bill, but I guess we'll have to bide our time till the governor makes the announcements. Hey, Dan, you want to kind of kick it off with Tyler?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. And thank you, Secretary. Good morning, Tyler. It's good to see you. I know Jim did a short introduction, but I think, you know, one of the things that I was most excited about your appointment is I think this might be the first time in quite a while that we've had a commissioner who not only understands the policy and the substance, but also brings an electrical engineering and a deep technical understanding. So the combination of those 2 things, I think, and, you know, really important for the commission and for the state these days. So glad you're there.
Thank you.
I thought we would start maybe, Tyler, just by opening up. Obviously, you're approaching the end of your first year. I do remember being a commissioner in the first year. It seemed like most days I had my mouth in front of the fire hydrant and really scrambling. So interested in your first impressions and observations and your thoughts on 2021.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks you, Jim and Secretary and Renew for putting this on. As you said, it's been a very interesting first year, or approximately a year for me at the Public Service Commission in this time. You know, not only a first year, but a fairly unprecedented year at that. Very exciting. When I first came in, the first open meeting I had, a very long agenda as they were waiting to get a full commission seated back again. But the key decision that we made at the end was related to broadband expansion. And Governor Evers had requested a very substantial increase in the budget for broadband expansion grants. And the legislature and the governor agreed on $48 million over 2 years. And at the commission runs that broadband office and ran that grant program. And we approved just shy of $24 million in broadband expansion grants to 72 grantees. And that would serve about 3,000 businesses and 46,000 residents with broadband. So a lot of work to go, but that was my warm up. And then the chair called me over that weekend and said, hey, we're going to have an open meeting on Tuesday virtually and start to address COVID. And so 5 days later, we had a virtual open meeting on that Tuesday and placed a moratorium on disconnections for electricity, natural gas, and water service in the state. And then opened really 2 dockets that day that we've continued to come back to time and again throughout the year. One related to the service rules and the disconnection, and then a separate docket related to the financial impacts of that for the utilities and keeping track of that. So that has been an issue that's new, that no commission in recent history has had to work on and deal with, but that has been one that's come back numerous times. Wanted to also give a plug, before I talk energy, give a plug to our water regulation. And we did approve this year 5 programs for utilities who are offering grants and loans to their customers to help finance the removal of pipes containing lead. And we know that's an important issue as well. On energy, we have also, besides all of that, we've been busy on energy. We had the 2 COVID dockets that I mentioned. We approved settlements or rate freezes for Alliant and Madison Gas and Electric, 2 of our larger investor-owned utilities. We approved a natural gas expansion to Southeast Wisconsin, where most folks are probably aware, but you've got essentially farm fields that are now being converted to, you've got a gummy bear factory, you've got Amazon, you've got healthcare centers and other facilities there that, very different usage. And the natural gas infrastructure is very constrained down there. We also approved the first use of the environmental trust financing law, which was created years ago, allowing the securitization of $100 million of the retired Pleasant Prairie power plant in Southeast Wisconsin. And that's really exciting for Senator Coles, Senator Rob Coles, who was spearheading that many years ago in the legislature. Great that he's still in the legislature and I was able to see that first used. And I think that's a model that hopefully can be used in the future. We had some smaller utilities who had very important rate cases. They serve some large paper mills and a foundry and issues there that were very important. And then we also approved 2 large solar farm CPCNs, and then a few other solar projects throughout the year. So it's been a very busy year, and there's other stuff going on that I didn't even cover. But I think that kind of sums up maybe my one surprise was coming in as a commissioner. I started with a really good knowledge base, having been seeing the PSC in action for 7 years in my previous role, and knew a lot. But the breadth of issues that the commission covers and has responsibility for and regulatory oversight of surprised even me. And so I've been learning a lot about the multitude of issues and cases we see, and looking forward to continuing to do that.
Great, thanks, Tyler.
You bet.
I think we'd like to maybe go to just a couple of questions, and understanding the audience here today, Tyler, I would pose a question about, if you sort of had a magic wand and could look at 2021, what are the 1 or 2 things that you think are most important and most actionable that the commission can do in 2021 to advance the goal of increasing the amount of renewables in the state of Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you know, we've opened some dockets, and we can talk a little bit about that to investigate some of the key issues. One around electric vehicles, and second around what we call parallel generation rates, which most of the rest of the world calls DERs, or distributed energy resources, and the tariffs around those. But just to kind of look ahead, we've got most of our major utilities may come in for their rate cases, and so those will be opportunities for them. Obviously, how to treat COVID and how to treat the arrearages and debt and the various issues related to that, as well as rates moving forward, will be key issues in those rate cases. We've got a number of large solar farm proposals in front of us. The stats I have is we've got 8 more projects that have been filed, whereas we've approved 6 so far in the from April 2019 through January 2021. We've permitted 6 solar farms totaling 1,049 megawatts. The caveat being one we just looked at last week. So that verbal approval of the Wood County Solar is in that count, although a written order is still coming. In front of us, looking forward, there's 8 more projects that have been filed. Some are really far advanced. Some have just filed their first pieces with us, but those represent another 1,575 megawatts of solar. And I think we'll have about 5 of those definitely come before the commission here in 2021. So that will be 2 of our biggest pieces of work on the energy side. And I think in addition to that, then looking at the generic dockets that we've opened up, those present some of the best opportunities to address some of these issues in a more holistic way.
Great. Since you brought up the subject of generic dockets, I would be interested in your general view about the use of generic dockets and why you think that they're the right tool. Mm-hmm. And then specifically, take a look at some of the, you mentioned parallel generation, PSC 119.
Yep.
And the EVs dockets, 3 important dockets that have been opened and are moving forward. Sort of your expectation over the next several months on those.
Yep. Yeah. So as far as generic dockets in general, as you know, there's just a lot of issues, and there's a lot of stakeholders that have various perspectives and various experiences. And so I've found them to be extremely valuable. If we think of the electric vehicle as a starting point, the utilities know their distribution grid. They have the relationship with their customers. And in Wisconsin, our electric vehicle market is fairly nascent. But when you look out at other states, there's some supply chain actors, suppliers that have a lot more experience. What's happened in some of these other states. And so when we've done the comment periods in that generic docket, we are able to get the input from the Wisconsin utilities and Wisconsin associations that know Wisconsin best, but we're also bringing in this expertise from states where the market is kind of 5 years ago, their market is where ours is today. And so they've already got that learning and trial and error a little bit, and they're able to bring forward some of those best practices into our ideas. And we can kind of, the thought I had is making sure we're skating to where the puck is and where it's going, and not just looking at where we have been, but in fact making sure we're going where we need to be. And I think that's where the generic dockets can help us really understand that landscape and what we need to do. So just to tick off, we have our electric vehicle docket. In December, we issued a final order that lays out a framework for EV programs. And we received a lot of really excellent comments from a variety of stakeholders. One of the additions I made to that final order that was approved and included was based on the comments we received, was to really ensure that all the different submarkets that you could run a program or a pilot for were enumerated there. And we heard from a lot of stakeholders. You've got the residential at home. If you have a garage or a driveway, you've got that market. You've got multifamily, apartment buildings, condos. There's different needs, different approaches for that. You've got low income customers, perhaps different needs for them. You've got medium and heavy duty vehicles. That could span private fleets, public fleets, public transit. Again, different markets, different decision makers. They may need different approaches. And then finally, you've got public charging and level 3 or DC fast charging. So now, all of those are laid up, and hopefully that's a sign to our various utilities that any of those are markets that can be addressed with programs or pilots. In our parallel generation, which is our distributed energy resources, we're actually currently accepting comments. So our staff put together a nice long memo, 51 pages for everyone to read. And I think one of the key things that we're starting to see is what we call connecting the dots. And what we were able to do with that memo, the staff was able to really get folks that work on MISO issues and MISO tariffs and MISO rules together with utility generation type staff experts and utility tariff experts, and sort of think about what the through line looks like between the needs in the regional market, what that means for utilities, and then how utility tariffs should reflect what those costs and what those rates are to customers. And a lot of that information has been compiled in that. So I think that's an effort that I know is ongoing at the staff level and at the leadership level, is making sure that those dots are connected between how the system is really working. And I think you're going to continue to see that as we look at energy efficiency, demand response looking forward. And then finally, I'll touch on interconnection. So we did authorize the rulemaking to begin, and that's going to be a multi-year process, but very exciting. Everybody knows the technology changes that have happened since 2004. That's when we last wrote our interconnection rules for the state of Wisconsin. So you think about the advancement of Wi-Fi and digitization. You've got energy storage, and a number of engineering standards have been updated in that period of time in the last 16 years. So we've got an opportunity in front of us to really modernize our rules. A lot of our neighboring states have done or are in the middle of doing the same thing. So we've got a great chance to modernize our rules and get ready for the future there.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Jim,
Tyler.
I would pause here and see, turn it over to you as the lead moderator.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Tyler has got a lot of information there. So once he gets going, we could sit back and watch Tyler go, and it's incredible and awesome. We really appreciate all your efforts. Yes, Secretary Brennan, as has been mentioned, one of the governor's major initiatives was the formation of the governor's task force on climate change. They had 46 tier 1 recommendations, 12 of them specifically related to energy, and I wanted to touch on a couple. And interestingly, one of our audience members kind of touched on one of the issues. The DOA manages thousands of state buildings, the state fleet of vehicles. How's the department working towards incorporating clean energy and efficiency into your buildings and vehicles, and just what the state itself does to be a leader?
Great. Thanks for that question, Jim. And I have to agree, being able to listen to Tyler and learn more about the PSC process actually is elucidating even for me, and I work with him. And so it should be for everybody here. But you're right, we do at DOA, we have responsibility across the enterprise on a number of functions, and one of those big ones being the portfolio of buildings. And I think everybody's also aware that the main driving factor in what happens in capital projects is the governor's capital budget, which will be introduced around the same time as the operating budget in February, and move forward along the same timeline. I think everybody also is aware, people who are stakeholders in this, that there's 60,000 people in Wisconsin who are currently working in energy efficiency. It's the largest aspect in the clean energy sector. And with 6,000 buildings and properties around the state, we have a responsibility and obligation. And in fact, I think we inherited a situation at the state level where that hadn't been a focus. And so one of the things we have done since the introduction of the last biennial budget is we brought on a third-party consultant to work not only with DOA, but across the enterprise to identify energy conservation, energy efficiency projects within the UW system and around the state portfolio of buildings. They identified about $30 million that are ready to go right now, and tens of millions more that have been backlogged over the last several years. And so their capital request reflected that. And so I think what you will see when the governor introduces the capital budget is a continued focus on that as being one area, kind of an area of low-hanging fruit, if you will, for the state to be able to do that. In addition, we implemented new sustainability guidelines. They had not been updated in quite a while, and so the staff here at the Division of Facilities Development and Maintenance, they worked on those guidelines. They became official as of October 1st of 2020. And that's for projects that are in the pipeline right now and all those moving forward. And they're around sustainability. They're not just focused on energy. They have things like ecological impacts, water usage efficiency, locally sourced materials where we can, the wellness and comfort of those who are going to be using those buildings, and ensuring that there's at least a minimum standard on the on-site renewables and the ability for projects to be solar ready. So it really is an expansive look that we have taken. Tyler mentioned some of the solar activity that's going on, and we've been part of that. Announced just a few months ago that DOA and the UW system were going to be part of the solar farm in Fitchburg. that will save us money, but it's also just the right thing to do. Our current renewable energy contracts provide about 9%, almost 10% of our state facility electrical consumption. So we're trying to make sure that we can do that. In addition, to kind of just follow on the leading by example, that Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy is working on an enterprise-wide effort as well, not only within DOA, but across the enterprise for, how do we reduce greenhouse gases, but also, providing ways to identify environmental justice opportunities. How are we reducing solid waste, reducing water consumption? I'm proud that at DOA and the projects that we're doing now, we're now measuring that waste at about 96% by waste or by weight of the waste that we have in our projects is not put into landfills. It's diverted away from landfills. So we've got some things that are underway. Anything that we do on that, I think it's a multi-agency. It has to be across the enterprise, but it also has to be driven and directed by leadership and by the governor. And that's why, with the governor and the lieutenant governor really have made this a priority since day one. We're going to continue to do that. There are things that we've done through, people are somewhat aware probably of the VW settlement. We have spent significant resources on that related to most of the replacement of buses with that has been clean diesel, some electric. There was an effort to work on the grid for electric vehicle charging stations with that. That's an effort that will continue, even if we can't use those resources moving forward. Other states around us, as Tyler said, have been more mature in the way that they have approached this, and there are other states in the Midwest that have done larger plans around that, and it's time for Wisconsin to be engaged and involved in that as we kind of work towards what that sustainable future looks like.
That's great. And having the state being a leader like that really does make it easier and understandable for businesses and residents to say, hey, they can do it. They're starting to put in infrastructure. They're building their buildings more efficiently to save money. It really does help everybody else get going, and it kind of primes the pump for everybody else to really get going.
Yeah, and again, I would just say that in some ways, however, state government is a late adopter to that, and we are moving forward with what industry, with what local units of government, with what others have been doing, nonprofits and non-governmental organizations have been doing. So it's high time that the state be part of that, and I think it should be understood that the leadership on this has come from other places. I hope that through Governor Ebert's efforts and lieutenant governors that we are stepping up, and I think that this is going to hopefully pay dividends moving forward down the line, and we are going to be able to continue to be in that leadership role.
Yeah, I 100% agree. One of the other topics they talked about in the Climate Change Task Force was our workforce. One of the big benefits of renewable energy is that it's built right here in Wisconsin, and our energy money isn't sent to other states. To build this energy infrastructure, we're not only going to need to train a renewable energy workforce, but to retrain some of the fossil fuel industry workers who are going to be put out of those positions. Do you have any initiatives or things the state can work on with worker development, workforce development, and training?
Sure, and I think in some ways, and I wouldn't be working for the person that I'm working for if I didn't mention this. I mean, it kind of starts with education, and somebody who comes out of having been the superintendent and sat on the boards of regents for 10 years, has worked with the technical college system. I think the governor would first say that anything we're doing along the lines of economic opportunity and workforce development is something that starts in those places and making those investments. And so I think you're going to continue to see in this administration, and what we make a priority moving forward is that investment on the education side. And that means in apprenticeship programs as young as in high school, and making sure that there is a pathway for young people to get into this area. Again, I go back to at the federal level, there is this focus now that, the incoming president talking about 10 million new clean energy jobs. And what's our responsibility? What's our opportunity to be able to get people ready for those? I think people probably know this, but prior to the pandemic, the clean energy sector was growing about twice the rate of the rest of the economy here. And so, this is also an area of strength and an area of growth in Wisconsin, and we need to be doing that. I think there are a couple of areas through the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. I think it's had a different role it probably plays a different role and probably will as long as it's in existence in every administration that it's part of. I think it's been a key part of delivering some very important relief on the COVID-19 economic efforts and in industries of need. But I also think that there are tools, there's existing tools there in the tax credits that they have, and they're exploring opportunities. If we're doing these tax credits, are there ways that we can also incentivize and provide opportunities for responsible businesses who are making that investment in clean energy and making that investment in those areas for us to be able to do that? I think that there are ways that we can do, especially in manufacturing as companies grow. But I also, I do think that it's really important, and you raised the notion, and this is a kind of a real world example where, I've been in conversations, I know others have been, where you have a coal plant, and that coal plant employs, pick a number, 130 individuals. And when it goes to natural gas, it's probably about half that or less than half of that. And then, when it becomes, when we move to a solar or wind, those can have, a half dozen or 10 employees. And so there's a net loss of those, and there's a responsibility on our part mainly through the Department of Workforce Development, but throughout all of state government to ensure that we have the kind of retraining programs and that there can be kind of that seamless transition. There's opportunities for us to do it, but there's also an obligation, and that gets to, going back to what the Lieutenant Governor started with in his efforts or his conversation with us about the climate change task force efforts and what that means overall. And ultimately for us, there has to be environmental justice, but it has to be justice for those communities and the people who have made their career around this. They can't be left behind in what we're doing too. So leveraging those resources. And I also think that as we make this transition away from fossil fuels, there is a recognition at the federal level, and I think there are going to be federal resources that we need to be able to be deployed in the right ways where we can, to just ensure that we're getting where we need to moving forward.
Thank you. Dan, how about, why don't you take it over with Tyler and see what he has.
Yeah, Jim, if you're okay with this, I think we're starting to get some questions and answers coming in. I think there's a couple that were on my list that other folks are asking too. Nancy Vetter Schultz has asked, can we expect that the proper funding of Focus on Energy will be restored to a proper level? So Tyler, I would focus that on you, and really maybe, obviously you're playing a strong leadership role on Focus on Energy generally. If you could sort of lay out your vision for 2021 and then obviously address the potential funding increase opportunity as well.
Yeah, great. Happy to do that. Thank you. Yeah, so the Focus on Energy program, we're in our 20th year now for the program. We're be very excited to continue to celebrate that throughout the year here. It's been very effective, in fact, called, I think, or cited to be by some analysis to be the most cost-effective energy efficiency program in the country as of last year, as was alluded to. So the agency and Chairperson Bach is in charge of developing our agency budget. She has sent a request into the governor as part of our official budget request to double the budget of Focus on Energy, and that was really based on the previous time we did a potential study to see how much energy we can save at what cost. It was shown that that level of investment would still be very cost effective for the program. So that's what we based that on, and that request has been in. And as we talked about earlier, the governor will have his formal budget announcement and formal request to the legislature announced later here, maybe next month. And then throughout the first half of the year, between the governor and the legislature, they will work towards finding a budget. Hopefully by about July 4th. Just wanted to mention there's a lot going on at the commission related to Focus on Energy. We are doing a new potential study right now that will be done here in the summer of 2021. And that will lead into what we call our quadrennial planning process, which we do every 4 years. And then in 2022, or summer of 2022, we'll be making decisions looking out at the next 4 years. And so whether the budget increases or not, we have a process in place to move the program forward and continue looking at the future. So excited for that going on, and we'll see if there's an increase in the budget or not. And if there's not, Dan, your work with MWork and that report that you put out, they highlighted a lot of things about energy efficiency that I think are ripe for talking about, whether utilities could run more voluntary programs and how to modernize the way we think about energy efficiency as a real resource for states and for the utilities going forward. So excited to be leading that here at the commission and to see what the future holds.
Well, speaking of the future, Secretary Brennan, one of the next steps for getting all of this work done at the state is the development of what I have heard is called the Clean Energy Plan. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Who's leading it? What's the timeline and how will it work?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jim. That effort is being driven and led by the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy. It's across the enterprise. It's certainly part of an effort that needs lots of stakeholders, lots of input. That was kicked off late in 2020. We expect that there is going to be that there will be some kind of formalization on it come late spring of 2021. So we're moving along that pathway now. This Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy has developed a list of about 100 key strategies to identify gaps, some barriers, interdependencies, different things. And really what this does is it builds off of all the work that has gone on to date, all the work that this administration has done to date, but also the work that's gone on, that players like Renew and others around the state are doing. So they're coordinating that. They are really trying to get input and get stakeholders to be engaged and involved in that process. And for the ultimate outcome of it to be a living document and not something that simply is done once and then we're done with it. We in every case like this, I think, especially in the climate that we're in now, with the opportunities that we have and kind of where things are going, we need to ensure that what we do is adaptable, that we're able to kind of on the fly with the information at hand, with the changing data that we get to continue to adapt and evolve in what we're doing. So I think we're excited about that as being in some way a culmination of some efforts, but also it's the start of kind of where we're going and the momentum that we have at this point.
Yeah, that's great. Dan, did you have any?
Yeah, there's a couple more questions, Tyler, on the sort of the evolving business model for utilities. If we think about the future being much more distributed generation, less centralized generation, and traveling through transmission and distribution lines to this new future, there is a question sort of about the utility business model. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to sort of talk about the potential for the commission to work with utilities and address that question.
Yeah, thank you. I have not had much time to give it a lot of thought in my first year as a commissioner, to be honest, but certainly a topic that's out there a lot. And as many of this audience know, but just perhaps to level set, over the past 30 years, a lot of different states have taken a lot of different directions with how they regulate their utilities and how their utilities are structured. And we here in Wisconsin started somewhat down the path to deregulation and took our high voltage transmission and brought that out of our utilities and took our energy efficiency programs, or at least what they were at that time, and took a majority of that out of the utilities and created focus on energy. And so there is just a lot of change, but I think the fundamental question, it remains a good one, and it remains something that we need to continue to talk about, where the original business model was set up a long time ago, 100+ years ago. And the concept was it's a social good that everyone needs to be electrified. Everyone needs to have access to electricity and then later to natural gas service. And so we're going to compensate the utilities that build that infrastructure with a return to build it, give them the incentive to build that infrastructure and serve all the customers. Now that everyone's served and the technologies are changing, I think it's fair to continue to understand, well, what is the best model going forward? And a lot of states are doing that. I think Hawaii really is at the forefront of looking at switching, in the US at least, switching to what they call performance-based regulation. And so I think there's a lot of learnings we will get from other states and understanding how that works. I did hear a cautionary tale from a former regulator in Texas on the telecom side, who said, one time a telecom utility came in and said, well, we want to switch to performance-based regulation. And it sounded great. And then they ended up getting, 2 to 3 times the amount of money that they would have under the way they would have been regulated. And their service was, relatively the same as it would have been. And so I think those are some of the challenges to that is really understanding what the change looks like and what you're measuring. But at its fundamental, I think it's still going to be a conversation that's going to be very live in a lot of states, and we certainly will be watching those. At least I will be.
Jim, if I could have just a real quick follow-up. I think, Tyler, one of the things that I have noticed, particularly over the last 6 to 9 months, is fairly significant internal changes within the utilities. I mean, if you look at We Energy's path to zero by 2050, if you look at the commitments that MG&E, Alliance, Excel, Dairyland, WPPI, sort of the municipals, the co-ops, and the investor-owned utilities, there's a very different conversation happening today. And it strikes me that the opportunity through the generic dockets and the momentum where the utilities are already going creates a really exciting opportunity to use that momentum to continue this conversation on the business model. I wonder if you could comment on that.
No, I think that's exactly right. And as I mentioned with our kind of that through line, understanding how MISO works, understanding how the utilities are interacting with and bidding in power plants and how that all works, and then how do they translate back tariffs to their customers, so that those customers can participate and provide the values up to MISO. And then layered on top of that interest is FERC's orders around first energy storage and then distributed energy resources that are going to really somewhat redefine how those resources are accounted for and tracked, and who's able to claim credit for various attributes, and to where that it's a brand new paradigm with those orders, I think. And there's just going to be a lot of change, I think, in those markets that we're going to be staying on top of and be looking to figure out how to make sure that there's a fair tariffs and fair policies related to that, those technologies and those resources here in Wisconsin. And I think, one of the things that I've been very interested in learning a lot more is how to put energy efficiency and demand response on an equal footing as the generation resources that utilities currently are able to build and earn money on. And so that's one of the things I've mentioned in a concurrence I put out earlier this year on utility voluntary programs is an understanding that, today they're not earning the same on those programs as they earn if they put steel in the ground, as they say. And do we need to look at that and sort of make those equivalent, so that whether it's Nest thermostats meeting a capacity need on a hot summer day, or distributed solar PV that customers are owning, making sure they're getting the capacity value for providing that need on a hot summer day, the same as if a utility would be building a peaking power plant. So I think we got to understand how that works and make sure those values are understood and compensated where they need to be.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, that fits right into the energy mosaic theme that we've got for the whole conference this week, Tyler. I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's going to take in all of the above, everybody doing their part to try and save energy and then generate it with renewable resources where we can. We're kind of getting close to the end here, and I did want to give both of you guys a chance for some closing comments and thoughts if you had. We've got a lot more questions. I wish we had another hour. We could probably keep going, but I just want to kind of close it up here with Secretary Brennan. If you had any kind of closing thoughts or wishes about maybe what the people out there can do to help influence either the PSC, or that would be for Tyler, or the commission or the legislature going forward, what can we do, and what's your message for the future?
Yeah, yeah, and I have to tell you, I mean, my message, I guess, if I think about things, this is a painful time for people in lots of ways. This has been, such a challenge. We've lived now almost a year through this global pandemic and what that has done in disrupting our lives. We see in the last week that our republic itself is under attack. I mean, there's so much that is wounded right now. Hell, yesterday we had to put boards back up on our own state capitol, and we need people reinforcing. We need law enforcement to come in and reinforce our Capitol Police because of the threat potentially to what we all hold dear. So those things are enough to make us all hurt. And but I'm not going to end on that because I think those things are going to get better. They're going to get better a week from now. We see the end of the road and the vaccine for COVID-19. And, that's not going to fix everything with this. There are still wounds to our republic that are going to go on, but when we're done with that, or even as we're dealing with those things, what the climate change task force, what lots of people who are working on these issues, they've been working on an issue that has hurt us and hurts our ability to do what we want to do and be who we want to be and leave things to the future generations like we want to. So that the people who are the stakeholders who are listening today and who have been working on this, they know what pain feels like and they know what that hurt is all about. But there's also responsibilities, there's opportunities to make that better. And I think we've taken some strides. I hope that the governor in his first budget, in the work that we have done in being able to have people like Tyler and Becky at PSC and the work that's gone on there and the response in industry, as Tyler was just talking about, and Dan, that all that is an effort to not make this be about either you stand for a sustainable future or you stand for what's good for business. There is absolutely a place in between there that's good for everybody. And I think and I hope we can continue down that path. I think that my suggestion would be that as the governor introduces his budget and as we look at making more of these investments, be engaged, be actively involved in that process. There are new people in leadership in the legislature. There's new people on the Joint Finance Committee. There's opportunity there for us. There's opportunity when it comes to the federal level. But I think things are going to get better because of the work that Renew does, because of the work that stakeholders are doing, because this is good for everybody. And so I think we're moving beyond this period of pain and hurt to a better time, but we all need to keep working on it. We all have that obligation and responsibility for it.
Yeah, that's what attracted me to the industry is we're at an exciting transitional period that the future is extremely bright, pardon the pun. Tyler, have you got any closing thoughts?
I don't think I do. I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, to be on stage with Secretary Brennan and Jim and Dan. So appreciate the opportunity and look forward to a busy 2021 at the Public Service Commission.
Dan, thanks for your help. Is there any closing thought or comment you might have?
No, thank you very much, Jim, for the opportunity to spend some time with you and the Renew family today.
Appreciate it. Thanks to both of our panelists, to Lieutenant Governor Barnes and to Dan. We're really looking forward to all of you, working with all of you to help achieve the governor's clean energy goals going into the future. I would also, again, like to thank Invenergy for sponsoring this session and all of our sponsors for the summit. To everyone else, thank you for joining us. Let me know if you have questions or would like to follow up on what you heard today. I would also encourage you to join today's industry conversation session from 2 to 3 p.m. this afternoon to continue these renewable energy discussions. Just check the online agenda to join in. It'll be kind of a free-flowing conversation. Finally, many of our sponsors are represented in the virtual exhibitor space. Please visit the event website and click on the exhibitors to learn more about and connect with our 2021 sponsors. Many have virtual video meeting space hours scheduled where you can pop in for an immediate conversation. It's not as good as an actual booth where you can go shake somebody's hands, but they're available. They want to talk to you about all the exciting things they're working on. And it's the virtual way to meet people for the next few months. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the summit.